Sustain267.
Welcome to this episode of Sustain267 Podcast, where we host conversations around climate change, sustainability, and the environment. I am your host, Bertha Foundation. This episode is the first of a 12-part series where we look at disinformation, fossil fuels, and development across 3 African countries, Botswana, South Africa, and Mozambique. A bit on disinformation. Disinformation can be defined as false information deliberately and often covertly spread to influence public opinion or obscure a truth. Through public relations, propaganda, and marketing campaigns, disinformation is a tool that the fossil fuel industry has employed for decades to drive confusion about the causes of climate change and delay action that would address the climate crisis. This in an effort to protect their astronomical profits and shareholder returns. One of the main strategies across the African continent has been advancing the idea that fossil fuel extraction will advance the community, nation, and continental development. Development can be understood as having a positive connotation and involving the application of certain measures to instigate economic growth and improve people's lives. Our journey starts in Medie, a small rural village of 329 people, according to the latest publication census, a number disputed by the residents as too low. Medie is located in the southern part of Botswana, an upper-middle-income country in southern Africa. It is home to a single health post, a primary school, 4 bars, and Masama Coal Mine owned by Minergy Limited, a Botswana Stock Exchange Limited company. Masama Coal Mine, since 2023, has been operated by Meropa Resources, a consortium of 4 Botswana companies. Before that, since 2018, it was operated by Jacon Open Cast Mining, a Botswana-registered entity that was a partnership between South African company IPP and Giant Plant, a Botswana company. The Masama Coal Mine is an open-cast coal mining project with an estimated life of 100 years, opened as Botswana makes an effort to diversify its economy from diamonds. Diamonds, which currently account for around 80% of the country's exports, 1/3 of its fiscal revenues, and 1/4 of Botswana's GDP. In August 2018, Masama Coal Mine was granted a mining license for 25 years, and just 1 year later, the mine produced its first sellable coal, which was exported to South Africa and Namibia, with a celebration ceremony attended by company executive, government ministers, and members of the Botswana media. In April 2024, I traveled to the village of Medie, where I stayed for 2 weeks in a farmhouse generously rented to me by one of the farmers when I was rather desperate for accommodation because there are no short-term stay rentals such as bed and breakfast in Medie. The closest one I could find was about a 30-minute drive by gravel or dirt road in the bigger village of Lentsoletau. My trip was to establish the authenticity for the message frequently told to Africans across the continent that mining and extraction of fossil fuels will result in the development of our communities, economies, and livelihoods. This is a message we have often heard from political and business leaders. Here we have the President of Botswana, Mokgweetsi Masisi, NJ Ayuk, the Executive Chairman of Africa Energy Chamber, and the President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni.
In Botswana, we are faced with the challenges that many nation states are faced with. That's to do with how we adapt and how we manage to reduce the risk that's associated with development. And a lot of it is to do with the amount of CO2 we emit to the air, which is a threat to our environmental ecosystem. We've been heavily dependent on thermal power production, which uses a lot of coal because we have abundant coal reserves. And that's what we use for our base load production, which drives our domestic economy and drives our industrial agenda. We in the developing world suffer the most of the worst of those. And we pay for that through every means possible, including being made to pay by the financial institutions whose standards of measure for access to credit have included in there our ability to not emit, right? And that would stall and put us on the back foot our capacity to industrialize. So it's not that we are not committed to making sure we reduce carbon emissions. And I would hazard to suggest that we continue to pay a bigger price in even an attempt to resolve problems that are the responsibility of those developed.
NJ Ayuk, the executive chairman of Africa Energy Chamber.
The CEO of Saudi Aramco, the world's biggest oil company, says the global energy transition is failing and advises policymakers to abandon the fantasy of phasing out oil and gas as demands for fossil fuel is expected to grow in the coming years. NASA's comment was in sharp contrast to the IEA's forecasts last year that oil, gas, and coal demand will peak by the year 2030. Wading through these and more for me right now is NJ Ayuk, is the executive chairman of the African Energy Chamber in Johannesburg, South Africa. How does the Saudi Aramco CEO's comments on the future of oil resonate with you at the AEC?
I think the IEA has always been dead wrong on the future oil, especially with Africa. They've never really factored in Africa and other emerging markets. We didn't really count. But when you look at energy demand across the world, you're looking at populations rising in Africa, where you're going to see maybe by 2050, we'll be looking at about 2 billion to 2.3 billion people. So if you count in Africa, you count in Asia, and you count in most emerging markets, then you really realize that natural gas and oil are going to play a leading role for a long time to come. And I think that my good friend Amir Nasser out of Saudi Aramco, he's right on point on that. It is a fantasy to think that oil is going to be out of the world and we're going to move into a solar and or renewable future anytime soon. That's why Africa is right on. Don't you forget Namibia. You've seen the next big place, Africa's Guyana right now. Discovery after discovery happening. And Nigeria itself is even more interesting right now. President Tinubu's gas decrees have really sparked a lot of interest in what more can come into Africa's sleeping market that took 20 years to pass the Petroleum Industry Act. People are turning interest, but we cannot rest on our laurels. We got to drive it. This is time for us to get on the driver's seat and lead the world, especially when it comes to gas monetizations, gas development, but also drive up local content and drive up women in energy. African nation needs to industrialize, and that's what we'll be doing. That message is going to be very resounding clear. Even though we're talking about a transition as to what is going on, we would not stop with our march towards.
Benjamin Sporton, the chief executive of World Coal Association.
In the studio with me is Benjamin Sporton, CEO of our World Coal Association. Benjamin, thanks very much indeed for coming through. It's rare for South Africa to find friends, especially around the coal area, but here you are, and we're talking about technology that could potentially make coal perhaps friendlier to the environment than it is.
Well, as you said, coal is an incredibly important fuel for South Africa, and it's incredibly important around the world as well. We're very focused on the low emissions coal technology that reduces emissions of CO2 from coal. So things like high efficiency, low emissions power plants, the sort of power plants that are actually being built here in South Africa today, the Medupi and Kusile power plants are actually using that technology. Obviously, coal contributes to sustainable development. Mining here in South Africa and elsewhere in the region provides jobs, it provides investment for local communities. But obviously, coal mining and the use of coal has environmental impacts as well.
We are talking about oil and gas in South Africa and what we see as Standard Bank. Government has announced that it is looking at the potential for a new refinery. For us, we don't predict as to whether that will or will not happen. But if we look at the global trends and what has happened in India recently, we've seen it happen in Indonesia, we saw it happen in Malaysia. Increasingly, when a lot of these local players look at refining, They then partner with international companies that are prepared to take risks with them in order to develop such refining capacity. Whether the feasibility of the South African one is proven to be viable, we are likely to see increasingly more partnerships to be developed if that refinery is developed. What are we saying? We are saying there's a lot more potential for new investments, new type of market players, as well as increasing black economic participation in the sector, as well as the increasing use of partnerships, that's midstream and downstream. Firstly, we are a mining country. And so we tend to look at things here and we think we've mined gold, we've mined diamond, we've mined many other things, if those discoveries are successful. And that has got a potentially major impact onto the South African economy, onto the South African fiscus.
President Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources in Nigeria, Ambassador Gabriel Tanimu Aduda.
And whether we like it or not, I keep saying this at every opportunity I have. Fossil fuels will still be here with us for over 100 years to come. So the earlier we recognize that, the better for everyone. Yesterday, Daniel Smith, the Premier of Alberta region in Canada, was speaking and insists that what they have to develop as a region is fossil fuels. And that is what they need to grow their economy and what they have to grow their economy. So the world cannot muscle them into an agenda to run out of the resources that is available to them to develop their people and grow their economy. Africa is rich in natural resources.
President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni.
There is now awareness that some uses of petroleum-generated gases that create a blanket effect in the atmosphere that warms the temperature of the globe, melts the ice sheet and the glaciers, and causes the seas to rise and unpredictable rain patterns. That, however, is not the fault of oil. It is the fault of the misusers. Uganda, therefore, supports the movement towards cleaner energy sources, hydro, solar, wind, geothermal, and even nuclear, and we are preparing for all. 2 points are, however, clear. First of all, we shall use fossil energy for another 40 years. So you don't have to worry that the oil is about to run out of demand. As I will show, the always be demand for oil. In fact, although I'm never an opportunist, I cannot avoid noticing an opportunity for some of us that have entered the nightclub when the notice for banning nightclubs was proclaimed. New nightclub goers will not book in, and hence we shall have the nightclubs ourselves. You see, this campaign against oil is actually good for us, because many companies are fearing to invest in new oil ventures. But for us who are already there in the nightclub, since oil is in demand, the price is now going up. The bad elements are the comprador bourgeoisie, those who work for foreign interests in our economy.
This message was brought to media in particular by its political leaders and owners of Minergy when they were seeking approval from the media community to operate Masama Coal Mine, a requirement by Botswana government to issue a mining license. This is what the community, represented by the chief, Khosi Kabo, and 4 of his Dikhosana, or ward leaders, had to say about what they were told by Minergy during this period to get the community members and leaders to approve the coal mining project in their backyard.
You see the mine the way that we understand it. From the time we have known it since we were young, even when we were working for the mines in Gauteng, South Africa, we agreed because we have always understood that when a mine comes, it gives the jobs to the children of the village. And this is what we expect expected in media too. We expected them to give jobs to the youth of the village and the neighboring villages. This is the knowledge we grew up with. This is the knowledge, and from what we were told when they said they wanted to open a mine, but that has not to be, unfortunately. The big hope we had in this agreement was that it would grow our small village. We would work together and our small village would grow. We expected these developments to find us because of the mine. They had also promised that they would give jobs to the youth of the village and those without skills to work in the mine. They would train them to have a skill and give them a certificate so that if they didn't have an opening for them, they could have a skill to find a job in other companies, which is still a big improvement. When we agreed to this mine being here, what we were looking at was that our village is going to grow and we would be like other towns and have something for us. Our village would blossom a bit, so we are not always lacking.
When we were in office with them, we were talking and we said to them, because you are building a mine in our village, the least we can ask for, because you will be taking our children's land, taking the water supply and everything from them. If you could just at least hire them, give them jobs and let them be the ones to be working on the mine, so that at least they can have something to eat. Because you know, if you have taken what we would have been in inheritance from their parents, being the land and some of the water supply, and this is the issue we brought up to the table and we spoke about and we agreed with each other and we had been very, very respectful. They were very humble with us at the time, very good manners. After we agreed with them, indeed, and the village elders, we gave them the permission to use the land. And as you can see, they have started the mine.
The way we saw this, we saw that if this mine can open well according to their promises, we saw that when they do the mine, there are developments we can get as the village. If we had known that what these people were promising us is not going to be, I think I speak for many of us when I say we wouldn't have agreed. We didn't know and we trusted that when a mine opens, like in Orapa and Joaning, when there is a mine, there will be improvements in the village, will become a town.
These are the words made via verbal promises that resulted in what is today a village where its community feel that not only did they not develop, but they have been left worse off due to being the victim of disinformation and agreeing to host a coal mine. Worth noting that all these promises were made and accepted verbally, which goes to show the trusting nature of the people of Medie and Botswana, a people who place trust and value in an individual's manner and their respect to those who they are engaging with as a reflection of the person's sincerity. This agreement made in hopes of tarred roads connecting them to cities that play a bigger part in the country's economy and would connect them to opportunities for economic advancement, in hopes of jobs for the youth in their community in a country that has an unemployment rate of 26%, according to statistics by the Bank of Botswana in 2023. However, instead, they received worse health for community members due to soot from the mine, cracking of homes due to blasting in the mines, unproductive farmlands due to heavy dust from frequently passing trucks carrying coal from the mine, driving on gravel roads never built for this level of work, weight, or labor. The campaign that fossil fuel mining, or rather coal mining, will result in development for Medie didn't only have those who feel like they lost. Some won. The biggest winner being Minergy. Since inception, Minergy has received over 418 million Pula funding locally, where 16 million was raised through the selling of shares and approximately 390 million was through borrowings from Minerals Development Company Botswana, MDCB. MDCB is a private company owned entirely by the government of Botswana with the mandate to hold and develop all of Botswana's current and future mining interest. And its main purpose is to enhance and expand the government's revenue in the mining sector with a focus to diversifying mineral revenues beyond diamonds. The funds available to Minergy were used to establish the mine, its infrastructure and related costs, and to bail it out from the verge of bankruptcy in 2023. The situation of employing disinformation to advance fossil fuel projects under the name of development is not a new one. We've seen it repeatedly across the African continent and globally. Often, ironically, in countries that are debt-ridden and experiencing energy poverty, but also produce fossil fuels that are used to generate energy and large profits. Countries like Ghana that discovered crude oil in 2007 and were producing by 2010. At present, it's experiencing an economic crisis, struggling to service its international debts, and trying to manage an inflation rate of nearly 25%. For more on this, I highly recommend listening to the Drilled podcast that has done a significant amount of work around explaining and exploring the fossil fuel industry and its relationship with disinformation, including the foundations of it. Another part of the disinformation campaign that was neglected, or rather downplayed according to the community members, was the impact of this mine on the environment and its contribution to climate change.
We would ask them questions, and during the assessments, and we told them that there was going to be dust. They spoke about dust suppression and told us that the methods they are going to use, there won't be much dust. They will make all possible efforts to make sure that this dust doesn't come out through dust suppression. This was also showing in that report. The assessment were done between 2012 and 2018, and was it AEI impact assessment. They did all the assessments and produced the report. They gave us 3 booklets that we kept at the Kotla for the community to read for themselves. They help us or show us what this means and what that shows. We just used our little knowledge to read. Some of it we understood and some we didn't. But I will say the community didn't read it. They know it's there, but they haven't read it. Because I always see it at the office. It's written in English.
Although Botswana, located in sub-Saharan Africa, a region which contributed less than 4% of global carbon emissions, has played a small role in contributing to the climate crisis, according to reports by the International Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. Sub-Saharan Africa countries, including Botswana, will be the worst affected by the climate crisis, experiencing the most intense extreme weather events, such as floods and droughts. The impact of these extreme events will be made worse due to the low levels of development in sub-Saharan Africa. Countries and communities like Medie that are less developed are more vulnerable to climate change and negative environmental impacts. Through neglecting to fully and transparently disclose the potential impacts of coal mining on climate change and how Medie stands to be negatively affected, as the community of Medie believes Minergy has, the community of Medie is in a position that may result in the mine that they host significantly increasing their vulnerability to the effects of the climate crisis, that they are not privy to because this information, they say, was not afforded to them. Through the uses of phrases like green coal by Minergy's former CEO, villagers who from experience knew the potential harms of coal mining were led to believe this mine would be different. In the next episode, we look at politics, power, and agenda setting, and the role that they play in the disinformation campaign of community development via fossil fuel extraction. I am the host of Sustain267 Podcast, Batogili Sidze, and the sound engineer is Maleho Makoti. Let's connect on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, on our handle at Sustain267 and continue the conversation. The series is part of my work as a Bertha Foundation Fellow, hosted by the Botswana Society for Human Development. Take care.
Sustain267.